Two major Australian advertising bodies are set to merge next month to form the Marketing Association of Australia. They're aiming to enhance leadership and collective influence in the marketing industry. Let's bring in Darren Woolley now from Trinity P3. Is this a good idea?
This is a great idea and something that's long overdue, Ahron. What we've seen is obviously technologies having a major impact on both advertising and media. And what we're seeing here is an industry body called the Australian Association of National Advertisers, and another one called ADMA, which stood for the Association of Data-Driven Marketing and Advertising, merging together to create a more holistic approach, a broader view of the marketplace. Because I don't think we can have a conversation about advertising anymore in its traditional sense, when you've got things like influencers and content creators and the role that the digital platforms are playing in what is called advertising.
Which we all love. What are the risks that could come from this merger though? Are there any?
Not really. I mean, the two bodies have quite different roles to play, but bringing them together will allow a greater voice. And in fact, I think this should be the start of what should be a number of consolidations, because we've also got out there the Australian Marketing Institute, we've got the International Advertising Association. There's a number of different bodies out there all talking about advertising, and that's just from a marketer's perspective. If you look at agencies, we've got the Media Federation of Australia, we've got the Independent Media Agencies of Australia, we've got the Advertising Council of Australia, we've got the Communications and Public Relations of Australia, and even the in-house agencies have their own, called the In-House Agency Council. It's like the advertising industry loves creating these bodies, which possibly had a role to play. But in the 21st century, those roles are converging, just much like the technology that the industry relies on.
Who funds all of these bodies? How do they exist?
Well, that's an interesting point. Most of them are member funded, so the agencies pay for the agency ones. The marketers, some of them are paid by individuals, some by companies. But the interesting thing is the role that the major digital platforms, the Googles, the Metas, they've played in support, and TikTok or ByteDance have played in supporting these either through sponsorship or events. They've had a major influence, and have pretty much replaced the traditional media. I mean, on the traditional media side, we still have a number of industry bodies. You've got the Outdoor Media Association, the Commercial Radio and Audio, Free TV, Think News Brands, local and independent news associations. There's 5 that just represent what you would call traditional media, and yet almost all of them are creating content going onto digital platforms. And then we get into the IAB, the Interactive Advertising Bureau, the Digital Publishers Alliance, and Digi, the Digital Industry Group Inc., which is pretty much those large platforms joined together to really look after their interests as well. So you can see there's a plethora of these industry bodies all looking out for very specific industry issues. But there has to be a call for consolidating that and getting a more powerful approach, particularly in the face of regulatory focus on the advertising and marketing industry, data privacy and things like that. But also to be a voice to really represent the marketing and industry professions in these changes. Some people think AI is an existential threat. All of them individually will not have the power that they would have collectively. And so, this could be the start of what we see as a major consolidation. In other markets like the US, they have far less. Australia is particularly good at creating industry bodies, and perhaps we need to see us follow the UK and the US and have a more focused approach to these industry bodies.
I just keep imagining these industry events that you go to, these conferences, and everyone's just constantly saying, how the heck do we deal with this internet thing? And let's create a body to try and deal with it. And here we are today. Let's see if it can make it any better. Let's move on, because Southern Cross Media is slashing up to 300 jobs as deteriorating market conditions, weaker than expected TV revenues force a media giant into a major cost-cutting overhaul aimed at delivering up to $150 million in annual savings. I feel like another month, another major traditional legacy media brand announcing job cuts. Why 300 now?
Well, look, as it said in the release to the stock exchange, the advertising market is under significant pressure, but the TV industry is the one that's copping most of it. Advertisers are moving more of their budget to the digital platforms and away from traditional broadcast television. And so there's a significant shortfall for Q4 2026 for the TV industry, but for Seven in particular. There's also, some of this was planned, in the merger that happened, and the SCA, as it's now called, Southern Cross Media Group, did have identified where the savings would come from. The interesting thing from my point of view in reading that stock exchange release was the fact that a lot of it is going to be focused on actually reducing ongoing costs, particularly around contracts, because this is all.
Well, let me interrupt you there if I can. Let's read some of this to the audience since we're talking about it. So first, the group has today commenced a significant cost reduction program building on its merger synergy activities, we love the S word, which have delivered run-rate savings of $30 million. Subject to finalising consultation and other processes, the program will lead to 250 to 300 full-time employees leaving the group before the 30th of June. It then goes on to say this, which is what you were referring to, and this is a really fascinating point, aside from the job cuts. Subject to finalising year-end audit procedures, the group expects to raise an onerous contract provision of $65 to $70 million. Are they talking about AFL rights here? Because when they talk about the audit, delivery of content in the legacy media, obviously there are the big studio deals, and that's one thing, but they spend a lot of money on AFL rights, and it's essentially killing the jobs market in the TV industry.
Look, and that's right. A lot of the content cost is sports rights, particularly for Seven, the AFL rights, which have escalated in price because what the sporting bodies did, and the AFL was a leader in this, was that they went from just putting out the broadcast, which covered everything, to broadcast, digital, streaming, and there's all these components that you have to bid for. And so what we're seeing here is the price is going up and up because some of the competitors to traditional broadcast have very deep pockets. And if they can secure content, then they'll absolutely do it because they're in the same business. They're in an advertising business. They're selling eyeballs to advertisers, and if sports like the AFL do that, they're willing to dig deep because they've got multiple ways of monetizing that, not just in broadcast.
The question is whether there's return on investment for the television network. Gone are the days of loss leaders where you can run your promos and hope that people stick around for the week to watch those shows. They're not watching the shows and it doesn't seem to be working. It's a really fascinating situation for them. What do you think the TV industry should be doing? I mean, I obviously work in it, have a lot of ideas myself. One thing is to maybe create a tiered subscription platform. I mean, if they're going through what the newspapers went through with the collapse of advertising 10, 15 years ago and all the job cuts that occurred there, the way that 9 newspapers was able to survive was to build a strong subscription model. 7 doesn't have one. Do you think that that's perhaps something they should be doing? What's the positive news here?
Well, absolutely is compete, but not compete directly with the digital platforms, but perhaps compete with the streamers. Stan has got its for 9 has got its own sports package that they sell. But the trouble is the government also has a role in this because they also demand that that the broadcast rights go in free to air. So there has to be a component of all sporting events that are seen.
And it's killing them. Yeah, it's killing them. I mean, the government's been trying to help. They've obviously put aside a lot of the taxes, things like the licence fees as well. They've been handing out money to news organisations with the public interest news gathering programs, and yet no matter what they do, we keep seeing these job cuts. It's a really difficult time, particularly for our friends who work in the free-to-air market, so we do not want to dance on anyone's grave. We just hope they can find a way. Darren, we've got to leave it there. Appreciate your time as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ahron.